Hey everybody, welcome to my booth. I'm Jay, and today's sample's from Chris. As always, if you'd like me to review a sample of yours, send me something. There's a form in the description, and we'll do one of these for you ASAP. There's coaching on my website if that's more your speed. And lastly, it's YouTube. There are buttons you click if you like this stuff and you find it helpful. You can help me out. Pay it forward. Let's dig in, Chris.
When you passed, I returned to an incomplete state. I lost my way almost immediately, once the electrified moment of shock had turned to a dull muscle ache in my soul. I can't remember a day without you. Not without any clarity. We were so complete. I knew it was coming, and I sat over your hospital bed, watching over months as you became sicker and paler and more frail. I knew it was coming because the doctors warned me, but it's impossible to believe, impossible not to hope until the final breath vanishes and brings that finality of death. The certainty our paths will diverge, and no new memories can be created between us. No new life. But I can bring you back, return you to the world in my own way.
Cool. It's so cool. I love it. The things that I'm really into, this like drone in the background is very reminiscent. It sends me into like a sci-fi space, some sort of like dystopian universe. It reminds me very strongly of Alien, the just like ever-present drone of space and the ship and all that stuff that's going on in that movie and that universe. But also 2001: A Space Odyssey a little bit, that sort of thing. And it all just sort of colors the way you're performing it. So it's really interesting because your performance lends itself really well to this sort of dystopian, measured, plodding, disaffected, almost emotionless, monotone state, which I dig for this sort of material, and I think really suits this. It suits your performance. So a lot of the notes that I would have, I think that this works really well, in my opinion, for this sort of thing. But I'm curious directorially what it would sound like if we tried it different ways. So like in this middle section here, man, I've been recording an audiobook all day, and then I had a lot going on today, and my voice feels really tired. So this middle section, you get this like pitch of emotionality in a way.
Watching over months as you became sicker and paler and more frail. I knew it was coming because the doctors warned me, but it's impossible to believe, impossible not to hope until the final breath vanishes.
And I love that the pacing picks up and shifts relative to the rest, which is very measured and slow. And it helps to give this a lot of relief. So I do really personally enjoy that quite a bit, but I'm just curious what it would sound like if there was more pitch variety and difference, just to see what an A-B comparison would sound like if one vibes better or differently. But that's hard to say without context of this whole piece, what would fit or be the right decision, you know? Additionally, the other thing that I like, and I talk about this a lot, the thing that's really great is you've left in a lot of the imperfections here. So like there's this breath.
I knew it was coming, and I sat over.
I knew it was coming. And it sat, and there's that little, and just that little tiny breath imparts an intimacy and a humanity to the whole thing. And I point that out because a lot of times we can get really bent out of shape about our breaths, when to leave them in, when to edit them out. And so instances like this, where it's a narrative and a pretty engaging, emotional, at least in terms of the content that is being described, emotional narrative, those little breaths do a lot, as do the little mouth sounds that happen here and there. And it's all just lovely, I think. Now, one thing I will say, this drone that you have in the background is doing a wonderful job of masking any and all potential imperfections in your initial recording. It's really challenging for me to diagnose them exactly, but after a couple listens through, I'm a little worried that you may have overcompressed certain points, that your levels may have been too high at certain points. Again, don't quote me on that because it's hard to know for sure. But all to say, Chris, if you decide to take this drone out, I'm worried that you may run into like low end issues, meaning the bass tones of your voice and stuff may become overwhelming. And it may become more apparent the things that aren't ideal in the recording setup, but it's hard for me to point out what those might be by virtue of the sort of droning thing. But all in all, I really, really like this piece. Let me listen to bits again and see what else we can come up with.
When you passed, I returned to an incomplete state. I lost my way almost immediately. Once the electrified moment of shock had turned to a dull muscle ache in my soul.
So this is kind of what I'm saying with the directorial thing, is each of those lines end very, very similarly. If we just play the endings.
You passed.
Ba-ba.
Complete state.
Ba-ba-ba.
Immediately.
Ba-da-da. They're all kind of like da-da-da. And the reason why it works is content-wise here, you're describing, and this character, in my mind at least, is like just very buttoned up, very restrained, holding a lot back. And so that works. But again, I was saying directorially, and in terms of like other performances, if this is, it depends on if this is a choice or just the way it turned out. I guess they can be one and the same, but because they end in the same way, it imparts that there's not a lot of vulnerability to this character at this point, which is what gives such relief to us when we hear this section where the pace picks up and you get a little bit more heated and things like that, not by a lot, but by a little, and just that little tiny shift, because we've had the same note over and over again, that little shift gives us a lot of relief in that respect. And so, I would just be wary that all of these are ending in a very similar way. If that's a choice, rock on. If it's unintentional, just be aware of it and cultivate the ability to make the choice versus not. Additionally, in terms of directorial decisions, I'm saying that a lot because I don't really have specific critiques here, but the fact that this whole piece here, if we were to treat this as a standalone piece, it ends with, "I can bring you back." Excuse me. And so one way that I would be curious to hear it is if it had an arc to it where it went from like, here we are where we start and we get to this emotional pitch where this is, and it builds to, "I can bring you back." And that's the peak of the emotional intensity, the need to bring this person back after all this stuff happened. I'd just be curious to hear that interpretation as well. Yeah. But all in all, Chris, I was really a fan of this. It's exactly up my aesthetic alley. I'm a big fan of this sort of stuff. So let us know in the description where this is from and where we can find it if it's part of a larger piece or something like that, because I at least would be very curious to hear the rest of it. Anyway, Chris, I hope this was helpful for you, and for everybody else, I hope it was interesting and helpful as well. And until the next one of these, everybody, be well, and I'll see you there. Toodles.